Disclaimer! This video is convoluted. I covered a lot of ground, didn't fix the issue, had parts delays. Parts that came in were bad, had more parts delays. Bear with me, this is a weird one. Welcome back to the Snow Family Racing Garage on this rainy Saturday here in northern Utah. Doesn't happen very often, but today you might hear some thunder in the background. The good news is that we are now playing with electricity in the rain because that just makes sense, right? Anyways, so I accidentally started this video quite a while ago, threw the parts cannon at this thing and replaced the ignition switch thinking that it would fix the amp light or volt light because this is an alternator, 1965. Things were starting to change from generator to alternator. People understood what an amp light was, not so much what a volt light meant. So it's an amp light that is technically a volt light because this is an alternator, not a generator. But, you know, did some digging and, through the factory manuals, and part of their troubleshooting is that if the amp light, volt light, as it even goes back and forth in the factory manual, if that light stays on with the key off, that typically means it's a voltage regulator or voltage regurgitator, as we like to call it because it's fun. We're going to change off the voltage regulator and see if that makes a difference. And then I'm going to show you all the steps that I took to replace the ignition switch because that's just good information to have. And I even had some pitfalls with ignition switches, tumblers. Apparently there's a couple of very year-specific changes that a lot of parts catalogs miss. We're going to talk about that as I go through it because I've got to finish that. But first, you can start it with a switch. But first, just to prove everything works like it's supposed to, I'm going to change off the voltage regulator right here. Got this one from Rock Auto because, that's where a lot of parts come from when you're waiting on things. This is the Standard Motor Products voltage regulator, very much like the factory piece. And we're going to swap this guy off. I even have an alternator down here Rock Auto had for 31 bucks. How can you turn that down when you're already paying for the shipping to get this here? You might as well get that and have another alternator should you ever need it. So let me show you what we're up against here and we'll keep on keeping on. Okay, so here's the ignition switch. Pardon my light, it's what I've got. It's a little harsh, but we can work with it. So there's the ignition switch. There is the little hole that you're supposed to put the paper clip through and it pops the ignition free. We've got a little access panel here, which luckily gives us access to the backside of the ignition switch, so I'm not trying to reach from that access panel up and over because that would just be not fun. Also, you get a nice view of the non-factory, factory-looking Riviera tack. For Riviera guys, you would know the factory tachometer, if a car had one, would be down here in the ashtray. Little hard to look at from being on the road, down to there to back up. That one's in a much better place and happens to look pretty correct. So I'm going to get the access panel removed. I'm going to get see what I'm up against. So that took a little bit more fiddling than I expected. I consulted the new parts, and let me show you this in a different way. So you see that little brass-colored plunger? That's the thing you're pushing on. Doesn't exactly have a ton of throw. I had pushed on it and pulled on it and pushed and pulled and done all sorts of fiddly things, and it just kind of came out in my hand. So fiddle with it for a minute, it'll come out. So let's get the trim ring off and see what we can keep doing. So in dealing with old cars, sometimes you find some weird things. The plastic part of this ignition switch has kind of got some issues. All the connectors are there. The new switch matches the old switch. This may not be the original switch now that I'm looking at it, but we're going to plug this guy in. I guess I got to take that little nut thingy off, but we're going to plug it in. We're going to get this process going. So I've got the ignition switch back in. There really wasn't much to video. I got all the connections taken care of. You can kind of see them on the backside there. Got the new switch in, got it located, it's solid. Now I'm fighting with getting the tumbler back in, and it does not want to go in so nicely. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I'm going to check the service manual, and we'll get back to this. So here's the answer. I have a 60 6 ignition switch, which has the little flat blade detent, which corresponds with the square GM keys. What I have here is the 65, or 64 and 5 correct Tumbler, and they don't actually have a call out for the 65 correct ignition switch. So we either have to use a 66 and newer Tumbler or a 64 ignition switch. Whew, that was some parts catalog jumping around. I've got the battery charging because it was low when I went to start it a minute ago. This right here is the voltage regulator. So I'm going to change this guy off and see if it makes a difference. Per the factory manual, there's 3 bolts. This may even be the original, I'm not sure, but it certainly does show its age. One connection looks like we got a condenser of sorts. I'm not sure where that goes. We're going to find out, and we'll pop this guy off. So just to show you, there are some differences, and I'm assuming this is some kind of a resistor. There are some differences between the two, but you know, just looking at them, I don't think we're going to have any issue. I've got the old condenser thingy on the new voltage regulator. Let's get it on. All right, so the voltage regulator swap didn't fix it. The amp volt light still comes on with the key off. That's not what's supposed to happen. Key off, everything's off. Anyway, I've got the alternator, the new one, sitting there. I hate loading up the parts cannon because I'd prefer to get it diagnosed correctly the first time, but in this case it may be easier just to swap a part than it will be to really get into the diag side of things. So I'm just going to swap the alternator off because I've got it. Worst case, nothing changes and I have to do the hardcore diag, but at least I know that it's not the regulator, because that's new, it's not the alternator, that's new, and the ignition switch is also new. So that means it's something that connects all 3. We're going to figure this out. So the alternator on this guy is a little hard to get to. It's hiding under the air conditioning compressor, and you've got one bolt right there and another one that hides down there. Conveniently, the belts run very close to both of those, making it very hard to get a wrench on it. But I've done it before, we're going to do it again. Just so you know, that was about 26 minutes longer than it needed to be. But you saw we had to take the air conditioning compressor off. And I felt like I had to disassemble half the car because I did loosen up some of the air conditioning stuff to be able to create enough wiggle room to get the alternator out. I don't remember it being that hard when I put it together, but who knows, maybe they go in better. Let's grab the new one and let's get the old pulley taken off, because the new one is a single pulley, the old one is a double pulley, and you can just swap pulleys on alternators all day long, just knock them free, they come loose. The charging system is finally complete. After 2 alternators, 2 voltage regulators, an ignition switch, and a whole slew of little fiddly things trying to figure out what was really going on. Bottom line, the alternator was bad and the voltage regulator was bad, and I replaced the ignition switch kind of because I didn't need to. It was masquerading as, you know, other issues, but it's really not a bad thing because now it's got a new ignition switch, ignition tumbler, a new ignition key that all feels really quite good, actuates correctly and all that good stuff. Anyways, so finally, an AC Delco regulator from Rock Auto, or an AC Delco alternator from Rock Auto. I got the box over here. You can't see it because it's actually got tools in it. Imagine that, box with tools. And I used a voltage regulator from Napa. The voltage regulator they got from Rock Auto that most closely matches the original condition didn't work. The voltage regulator from Napa is a solid state unit. It works. I don't know why, it just works. So I think the alternator that we had originally had some issues, which is why it got replaced, because it wasn't putting out voltage at lower RPM. The replacement, it never was good from the beginning. The voltage regulator that we got from Rock Auto, also not good from the beginning. But finally, voltage regulator from Napa, AC Delco alternator from Rock Auto, everything is fixed. The car is now drivable. We can enjoy this thing now after being, down with delays for like a month. Let's move on to other projects, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Make sure you watch the rest of the Riviera playlist so that way you can follow along and see all the progress this has been, all the progress this has had from when I just started working on it all the way up to today, and even when we took it to the road race course and went road racing. It was a blast. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you later.